There are individuals whose presence feels like a quiet sunrise, gentle, warm, and illuminating. These are the empaths, the ones who sense what others hide, who feel what others repress, who hear the emotional truth beneath spoken words. Their light is not loud, it is not forceful, it is simply there, steady, sincere, and undeniable, yet strangely such souls often attract those who both crave this light and resent it. The human psyche is a landscape of shadow and illumination. Where empathy shines, it reveals what others have not yet dared to confront within themselves. To meet an empath is to be seen without a mask, and for many this is uncomfortable. For those who have avoided their own depths, the empath appears not as a friend, but as a mirror. And a mirror is both a gift and a threat. People who repress their wounds feel exposed in the presence of someone who understands emotions instinctively. They may sense that the empath perceives their inner fractures, their suffocated desires, their unhealed traumas. Instead of welcoming this awareness, they may experience quiet resentment. Not because the empath harmed them, but because the empath's presence awakens something they have long tried to silence. The empath's compassion highlights the absence of compassion they give themselves. Their sincerity exposes the parts of others that are built on pretense. Their emotional intelligence reminds others of their own disconnection. And in this contrast, resentment grows. Not loud, not violent, just a quiet, uncomfortable resistance toward the one who brings clarity. Yet the empath must understand this. The resentment they receive is rarely personal. It is the result of another person battling their shadow. Light naturally reveals shadow, and shadow naturally reacts. The empath does not attract resentment because they are flawed, but because they are significant. They stir what has been asleep. They awaken what others refuse to feel. They remind others of who they could become. Empaths must therefore learn not to dim themselves out of guilt or confusion. It is not their role to shrink so others can avoid themselves. Their purpose is simply to remain true to their inner nature, rooted, aware, compassionate, and grounded. The right people will be drawn to their light, not because they need it, but because they honor it. And those who resent it are merely revealing their distance from their own inner truth. The empath's task is simple yet profound. Hold your light without apology. Walk your path without bending. Understand that your depth is not a burden but a beacon. And remember, those who secretly resent your light are unconsciously longing for their own. Empaths illuminate emotional truths that others try to hide, often without realizing they are doing so. They walk into a room and sense what is unspoken, what has been avoided, and what has been buried beneath layers of defense. Their intuition is not a mystical performance. It is a deep attunement to emotional frequencies that most people overlook. While others listen to words, empaths listen to tone, tension, silence, and the subtle shifts of energy that reveal the story behind the story. This ability makes them both comforting and unsettling, depending on the readiness of the person standing before them. For individuals who have spent years suppressing their emotions, numbing their truth, or constructing identities to hide their fragility, meeting an empath can feel like an intrusion, even though no intrusion has occurred. The empath simply sees what is already there but unacknowledged. They don't force insight, their presence itself has insight woven into it. They perceive the heaviness behind a smile, the insecurity behind arrogance, the grief concealed within anger. Their awareness draws out the emotional reality others have carefully tucked away. This natural illumination can be profoundly healing for those who are willing to face themselves. In the presence of an empath, they feel understood without explanation, accepted without performance, and valued without condition. They sense the rare kind of connection that encourages authenticity. This can inspire growth, honesty, and a desire to break free from emotional restraints. The empath becomes a silent catalyst for transformation, offering light where there has been darkness. Yet for others, that same light feels threatening. Emotional truths, when revealed prematurely, can provoke discomfort, defensiveness, and even resentment. Some people fear vulnerability because they associate it with weakness or danger. They have built their identities around avoidance of pain, accountability, or the rawness of their inner world. When an empath unintentionally highlights these layers, it disrupts the fragile stability they have constructed. They may react by pulling away, criticizing, or subtly resisting the empath, not because the empath has done harm, but because their inner truth is rising to the surface. The empath's illumination acts like a mirror, reflecting not only what is present, but what has been denied. In that reflection, some see possibility, while others see threat. The emotional clarity that empaths offer can feel like exposure to those who are unprepared to confront themselves. It can make them question the narrative they've used to navigate their lives, forcing them to acknowledge aches they believed were long forgotten. Rather than face these truths, they may project discomfort outward, blaming the empath for what is, in reality, an internal conflict. Empaths often feel confused by these reactions, wondering why their kindness brings such mixed responses. But it is not their light that creates chaos. It is the truth that light reveals. Their presence invites honesty, depth, and self-awareness. For some, this is a gift. For others, it is a challenge. And for the empath, understanding this dynamic becomes the key to navigating relationships without sacrificing their sensitivity or diminishing the light that is naturally theirs. Their presence acts as a mirror, reflecting back to others the truths they often refuse to acknowledge within themselves. When someone encounters an empath, they are not merely meeting a person, they are meeting a quiet reflection of their own emotional landscape. Empaths absorb subtle cues, internal states, and hidden tensions, and without effort, they project those insights outward through their understanding, their reactions, and their deeply attentive presence. This mirroring function is not intentional. It is a natural response, a psychological resonance that forms when one deeply attuned soul stands before another who is disconnected from their own inner world. For those who have avoided introspection, the experience of being mirrored can be unsettling. They suddenly sense parts of themselves rising to the surface, insecurities they've buried, desires they've minimized, fears they've denied, or emotional wounds they've left untouched. The empath's perceptiveness exposes these fragments not through confrontation but through clarity, the way an empath listens, the way they understand without needing explanation, the way they can articulate what someone feels but cannot express. These behaviors make others feel seen in a way that bypasses their defenses. This can be both disarming and destabilizing. People who have crafted identities around strength or control may feel their facade beginning to crack when faced with such a mirror. They notice their own emotional inconsistencies. They hear themselves speaking words that feel misaligned with their true feelings. They become aware of the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. This awareness doesn't come from judgment, it comes from the empath's emotional clarity. And because this clarity reflects truth, those who are unprepared to face it might interpret the reflection as criticism or threat, even when none is present. The mirror effect becomes more intense in relationships where emotional avoidance is prominent. The empath's presence highlights what the other person has neglected. Compassion they deny themselves, boundaries they fail to uphold, pain they've convinced themselves no longer exists. When these truths rise, they can trigger defensiveness, withdrawal, or resentment. It is not that the empath exposes them intentionally, it is that their inner light illuminates what the other has hidden in shadow. The reflection becomes unavoidable, and for someone who is not ready to see themselves clearly, this feels overwhelming. But for those who are willing to embrace growth, the empath's mirroring presence becomes a catalyst for profound self-discovery. They begin to understand themselves through the empath's insights. They recognize emotional patterns they were blind to. They feel encouraged to explore their inner depths with honesty and courage. The mirror no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a guide. For the empath, this dynamic can be confusing because they do not always understand why their presence evokes such strong reactions. They simply reflect what is already there. They offer understanding, not exposure. Yet the human psyche responds to truth in unpredictable ways. Some move toward it, others run from it. The empath's mirror reveals the soul, not to harm but to awaken. And awakening for many is both the most frightening and liberating experience they will ever face. Resentment toward empaths is rarely personal because it does not arise from anything the empath has done, but from what their presence awakens within others. When someone carries unresolved emotional wounds, buried insecurities, or unacknowledged shadow aspects, encountering a deeply perceptive and emotionally aware person can stir discomfort. The empath becomes a catalyst, not through action but through existence. Their sensitivity, insight, and sincerity act like light shining into corners someone has tried to keep dark, and this illumination can feel threatening even when it is not intended to be. People who resent empaths often do so because the empath's presence exposes the contrast between who they are and who they wish to appear to be. If someone relies on emotional detachment to feel strong, meeting a person who naturally connects deeply can challenge that illusion of strength. If someone hides their vulnerability behind humor, aggression, or coldness, the empath's gentle awareness can make that disguise feel thinner. And when someone is used to controlling relationships, they may resent the empath because they cannot manipulate or deceive someone who sees beyond surface behavior. In all these cases, the resentment stems from insecurity, not from any wrongdoing by the empath. This resentment can also emerge from envy. An empath's emotional intelligence, depth, and authenticity can remind others of the qualities they lack or suppress. People may wish they could feel so deeply, understand so intuitively, or love so wholeheartedly, but their own internal blockages prevent it. Instead of facing those blockages, they may redirect frustration toward the empath, blaming them for the mirror they never asked to look into. The empath becomes a symbol of what they cannot access within themselves, and this can create tension that feels personal but is not. Another reason resentment arises is that empaths unintentionally disrupt dysfunctional emotional patterns. Many people build relationships around unspoken rules, power dynamics, or emotional avoidance. An empath's presence challenges these patterns by introducing clarity and honesty where confusion and suppression once dominated. This shift can feel destabilizing. People may project onto the empath, assign them motives they do not have, or accuse them of being too sensitive or too intense, because these labels help maintain emotional distance. In reality, the discomfort is not about the empath's traits, but about the inner work the other person is unwilling to do. For the empath, this dynamic can be deeply confusing. They often take things to heart, interpret others' reactions through compassion, or question whether they did something wrong. But the truth is that the resentment has almost nothing to do with them. It is the result of someone wrestling with their own emotional shadow, and the empath simply happens to be the trigger. Understanding this can free empaths from unnecessary guilt, and help them recognize that their sensitivity is not a flaw but a force that reveals truth. In many cases, the people who resent empaths are the very ones who secretly long for the same depth and connection. They feel drawn to the light but frightened by what that light reveals. And so the resentment they express outwardly is really an inward battle, a conflict between their desire for healing and their fear of vulnerability. People may envy the emotional clarity and authenticity that empaths embody because these qualities reveal a rare alignment between inner truth and outward expression. Many people move through life wearing emotional armor, suppressing their feelings or shaping themselves according to expectations. They often speak from the surface rather than the soul. When they encounter someone who lives from a place of honesty and intuitive depth, they feel confronted by the gap between their true self and the version of themselves they present to the world. This contrast can stir admiration but also envy, because it highlights what they have lost touch with internally. Emotional clarity is a form of inner freedom. It allows a person to understand their motives, recognize their wounds, and respond rather than react. An empath does this naturally. They sense their feelings before they become overwhelming. They process their emotions with awareness, and they navigate relationships with a deep understanding of human complexity. Those who have not cultivated this awareness often feel confused by their own emotions, pulled between conflicting impulses, or disconnected from their inner voice. Witnessing someone who moves through emotional terrain with grace can trigger a longing they may not fully understand. This longing transforms into envy when they feel unable to access the same level of depth within themselves. Authenticity is equally powerful. To be authentic is to live without constant self-betrayal, to speak truth without fear, and to allow oneself to be seen without manipulation. Empaths embody this naturally, and their genuine presence exposes the performative tendencies in others. Someone who relies on masks to feel accepted may feel threatened by a person who requires none. The empath's authenticity becomes a silent reminder of all the ways the other has abandoned their real desires, silenced their emotions, or shaped themselves to please others. Instead of facing this inner conflict, they may direct frustration toward the empath, interpreting their authenticity as naivety, intensity, or unnecessary depth. Envy also arises because emotional clarity and authenticity are forms of strength that cannot be faked. A person might cultivate intellectual knowledge, social influence, or material success, but emotional intelligence is something that develops only through self-awareness and willingness to confront one's vulnerabilities. When someone sees an empath express emotions openly, connect deeply, or understand others effortlessly, they may feel inadequate or threatened. They want the benefits of such clarity without doing the internal work required to attain it. This unspoken tension fuels envy. Additionally, the empath's ability to form genuine, meaningful connections can trigger jealousy in those who struggle to maintain relationships. The depth of trust an empath creates reveals the superficial nature of other people's relational patterns. Their presence shows what real connection feels like, and this can be painful for individuals who have built emotional walls. Instead of admitting their struggle, they may envy the empath's ability to bridge hearts so naturally. Ultimately, the envy directed at empaths is a reflection of unfulfilled emotional needs. It is not the empath's clarity or authenticity that causes tension, but the internal distance another person feels from their own truth. The empath unintentionally reminds them of what they could become if they were willing to listen to their own soul. An empath's task is not to dim their light, even though the world often pressures sensitive souls to shrink themselves for the comfort of others. Empaths frequently feel responsible for the emotions in their environment, absorbing tension like a sponge and adjusting their behavior to ease discomfort. Because of this, they may learn to soften their voice, hide their intuition, or pretend not to notice what they clearly perceive. They begin to equate visibility with danger, believing that their depth, insight, or emotional understanding is too much. But the essence of their nature was never meant to be muted. Their light is not a disturbance. It is a guiding presence that reveals truth, brings warmth, and awakens authenticity in those around them. When an empath dims their light, they disconnect from their inner wisdom. They suppress their natural ability to sense subtle shifts, ignoring the intuition that once guided them. They silence their emotional intelligence to avoid making others uncomfortable, but in doing so, they abandon themselves. They trade clarity for belonging, truth for acceptance, and intuition for approval. This self-abandonment does not create peace. It creates emptiness. It erodes self-trust and leaves the empath feeling drained, misunderstood, and unfulfilled. Their light was not meant to be caged, and the soul suffers every time it is forced into shadows. The world needs the empath's light precisely because it is rare. In a society driven by speed, performance, and emotional disconnection, the empath brings depth, honesty, and presence. They remind others to feel, to reflect, and to reconnect with themselves. Their ability to understand, without judgment, creates spaces of healing that logic alone cannot provide. Every time an empath stands in their truth, they give silent permission for others to do the same. Every time they honor their intuition, they strengthen their inner foundation. Every time they refuse to shrink, they reclaim their power. Remaining luminous does not mean taking responsibility for everyone's emotions. It means being rooted enough in oneself to shine without guilt. It means recognizing that their light may trigger discomfort, but discomfort is not harm. It is often the beginning of growth. People may project onto them, misunderstand them, or resist the truths their presence reveals, but this is part of the empathic journey. Their role is not to carry others' shadows, but to hold their own light steady so that those who are ready can find their way. Standing in their light requires boundaries. It requires choosing environments that value depth over performance, relationships that honor sensitivity, and paths that align with their intuition. The empath must learn that they are not responsible for healing everyone they meet. They are responsible only for honoring their inner truth. When they allow themselves to shine fully, unapologetically and without fear, their life becomes a reflection of who they truly are, not a dimmed flame but a steady beacon. Their light becomes not only a personal truth, but a force that quietly transforms the world around them. Those who resent the empath's light often unconsciously crave their own, because the very qualities that irritate them are reflections of the parts of themselves they have lost, denied, or forgotten. When people encounter an empath, they are meeting someone who has maintained a connection to their inner truth, someone who feels deeply, sees clearly, and stands in emotional awareness. For many, this is a reminder of the self they abandoned long ago. Instead of recognizing this longing as a call to return to themselves, they project resentment outward, directing it toward the empath whose presence awakens what they have buried. This resentment is not rooted in hatred, it is rooted in yearning. A person who is shut down emotionally may feel threatened by someone who lives with an open heart. They may dismiss the empath as too sensitive, yet secretly wish they could feel with such depth. They may mock the empath's intuition, while privately craving the same clarity. They may criticize compassion as weakness, even as they long for the ability to connect authentically. The tension comes from witnessing someone express qualities they themselves hunger for but cannot access because of old wounds, conditioning, or fear. Many individuals grow up learning that vulnerability is dangerous. They are taught to hide their feelings, stay tough, push down pain, or avoid introspection. As adults, these habits become walls that separate them from their own emotional truth. When they see an empath living in a way that defies those internal walls, it challenges their narrative of strength. They begin to sense the gap between who they have become and who they were meant to be. That gap is painful. Instead of bridging it through self-reflection, some direct their discomfort toward the empath who illuminated it. The empath's light stirs a silent desire to heal, to reconnect, to feel again. People who resent them are often wrestling with their own shadow, the part of themselves that remembers what authenticity felt like, but no longer knows how to reach it. The empath unintentionally exposes this inner conflict, making it impossible for them to ignore their longing. This can create an emotional push and pull. They want the empath's presence because it feels like truth, yet they resist it because truth requires change. In relationships, this inner contradiction becomes even more visible. Someone may be drawn to the empath's warmth, honesty, and emotional stability, while simultaneously feeling intimidated by the transparency the empath invites. They crave the safety and understanding that the empath naturally provides, yet they fear being seen too deeply. The desire to reclaim their own light clashes with their fear of confronting the parts of themselves that went dim. This internal struggle can manifest as irritation, avoidance, jealousy, or passive resentment. For the empath, it is important to understand that these reactions are not reflections of their worth. They are reflections of another person's inner distance from themselves. When someone resents the empath's light, they are really mourning the parts of themselves they have disconnected from. They are not angry at the empath, they are angry at the silence inside their own soul. And beneath that anger, there is longing. Longing to feel, longing to awaken, longing to reclaim the light they see shining so clearly in someone else. And so, if you are an empath walking through a world that sometimes misunderstands your depth, remember this: You were never meant to hide. Your sensitivity is not a weakness, it is a form of wisdom. Your light is not a burden, it is a guide. Those who resent you are not your enemies, they are simply souls struggling to remember their own brightness. Do not shrink to soothe their discomfort. Do not silence your intuition to fit into their shadows. Stand in your truth with grace, and let your presence be the quiet reminder that healing is possible. You are not here to carry others. You are here to illuminate the path back to themselves. Shine without apology, for the world becomes clearer every time you do.